I'd like to call the order the Travis County Facilities Corporation. The time is 11:25 a.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Chair Jimmy Paver,
Present.
Vice Chair Cheryl Brown,
President.
Commissioner Wilmer Roberts, Commissioner Jan Wenning,
President.
Commissioner Rebecca Weber.
President.
Actually, director. So.
Oh, sorry, Director. You want me to read it? Oh, okay, sorry, my bad.
Okay, on to item 2.
We have a board.
On to item 2, public forum, citizen communication. Do we have anyone here who wishes to speak?
We do not.
Okay. Item number 3, consent agenda. A, approval of the minutes from the June 1st, 2023 regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I moved that we approve the meeting minutes from the June 1st and June 13th.
Oh, all of
Oh,
those.
just sorry, the regular.
Can we do that? Can we put A and B together?
No,
You-
we'll do there.
You can. Yeah, it's an entire consent agenda, so it's fine.
We'll do it when it's. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Jimmy
from
was-
June 1st?
Jimmy already got.
Do I have a,
I second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item B, approval of the minutes from the June 13th, 2023 special meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the meeting minutes from the special meeting.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
One abstention. You get
Okay. Item 4, action items. A resolution number TCFC 2023-15 to approve inducing the UG Tech Ridge Apartments in partnership with an affiliate of Urban Genesis LLC to be located at approximately 4712 East Yeager and Palmer Lane. And authorizing the negotiation and execution of a term sheet and other matters in connection therewith.
Hey, Patrick, this is Jim Plummer. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Can I suggest that we take up item, I believe, 6, which is a discussion of a change in the income requirements before we take up the 2 individual projects?
Okay, it's you all, you and Ms. Weber had it.
He wants to pull that from the agenda?
No, he wants to start with that discussion.
Okay. What do we need to do procedurally?
You just say we'll go to, we're gonna skip to item 6.
Okay. We are going to skip to, it's item 8.
8, I'm sorry.
A discussion and consideration regarding board of directors issues and concern. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's discussion 5. I mean, discussion item number 5, a new modified terms for new development projects.
So this is prompted by the chair, the president, on the desire to look at potentially gaining more affordability in light of some of the concerns and desires that folks had. And so the real estate committee has met a couple times to talk about such, and has asked us, myself and Mr. Plummer, to work on looking at some strategies. So we've had enlisted the help of one of our development partners to help us with this. And I will turn it now over to Jim to kind of give you an overview of kind of where we are.
So this is.
What page are we on?
54.
Packet, it's
34.
page
54.
Thank you.
Okay. You had asked us to try and do an analysis of providing additional affordability. And we went back and looked at projects really all across the state to try and get an idea of what additional affordability levels would cost you. Because at the end of the day, these projects have to be financed. And we have to deliver a return to the equity provider in the deal that entices them to invest. So I went back through and I basically determined that in our current structure, on an average deal, and using very round numbers, that you get about $5 million of annual rent over a 15-year period. And then at closing and development fees and sales taxes, you'll get about $1 million, which you generally collect in the first 2 to 3 years. And then if there is a sale of the project in that 15-year period, conservatively, you get $2 to $3 million. So kind of your average net fees from a deal over 15 years would be about $8 million. And that $8 million is, when we bring you a deal, we tell you, we have a financial advisor run the numbers and compare the taxes that would have been paid on the building if it was taxable versus the income that you get from the deal. And generally, we capture somewhere between 60 and 80% of the taxes back in fees to you over a 15-year period. Then you take the revenue that you receive, and 50% is used by the housing authority for its administration, and 50% is put into a fund that has been dedicated to supporting very low income housing, generally at the 30% level. And that structure was originally adopted because it is more efficient to raise money from these kind of deals and then put that money into other transactions to support very low income housing than it is to try and put very low income housing into these deals. And the principal reason for that is that these deals are measured basically at an 80% income level. And so to get down to a 30% income level, you have a 50% drop in rents. In a tax credit deal, you're at a 60% income level. And to get down to 30% units, you have a 30% drop in rents. So it's far more efficient to put your money into a tax credit type deal, build out your own units, maybe buy units at a 30% level, than it is to try and put that into these deals. But we looked at various income levels. And if you look at, there's a memorandum, I think it's probably from Patrick, that talks about this. And at the bottom of that memorandum is a simple table that lays out the cost to you of different income levels. So if we look at 5% at 30%, 10% at 60%, and 35% at 80%, that costs you about $4 million in rent. And that reduces your annual rent, I believe, down to about 8% of the tax savings. We also looked at 10% at 50%, 10% at 60%, and 30% at 80%. And that reduces your rent down from 8 million to 5 million in general. And it reduces your share of the tax savings down. And I've got to find that number, to 12%. I hear somebody talking, but I'm not sure if anybody's asking a question.
Proceed, Jim. Sorry, we apologize.
Okay. So then we looked at providing 5% at 50, 10% at 60, or 35% at 80, or 20% at 60 and 30% at 80. So economically, they work out to be virtually the same, and have the same cost to them. I will tell you that the 5% at 50 and the 10% at 60, 35% at 80 is what the city of San Antonio has adopted because they wanted to deliver more units at a deeper affordability. The 20% at 60 and 30% at 80 is double the 60% units that the statute requires. And both of those are below what anybody else is doing in public facility corporation structures. Dallas and Houston are both looking at the 10% at 60 and 40% at 80. San Antonio has adopted the 5 at 50. If we
Jim,
do,
Sorry,
Excuse-
Jim. Can you hear me?
yes, sir.
So so the state statute that says 40% at 80, if you do 20% at 60 and then 30% at 80, does that still meet the requirement or does it have to be 40%?
No, it meets the requirement because it's actually 80% and below. So it meets the requirement and in fact doubles the 60% units over state statute.
Got it.
And if we do that, your rent would be dropped from 25% of sales tax of property tax savings to 15% of property tax savings. You would still get the closing fee, your developer fee, and the sales tax savings fee, and you would still get 15% of the net proceeds of a sale after the payment of the debt and equity. And so it would put you in a position of having about $66 million net proceeds out of a deal. And the reason I asked you to take this first is because the two transactions that we have before us today had actually indicated that they can do 20% at 60% if you reduce your annual rent from 25% of property tax savings to 15% of property tax savings. Neither one of them was certain that they would be willing to go below that. Their fear is that if you provide deeper affordability, you will adversely affect your ability to get market rate rent. And so I wanted to have this discussion and get your thoughts before we considered the two projects today. One of the things I have to note for you is that the projects that we do on a going forward basis have to be approved by the county commissioner's court. And so if we adopt a different income strategy, we would then need to take that to the commissioner's court on a project by project basis. And there's a possibility they would still say no. But there's also a possibility that they would say, yes, at least you're doing more than the statute, more than anybody else. And they're focused on 60% units. And you've now doubled the requirement for 60% units.
With 10% of the tax savings reduced.
That is correct. In order to get roughly equivalent yields to the investor, we have to give up annual rent.
Okay.
So Jim and I have been talked about this at length. I would endorse the 20 and 60 if you were asking me. But you haven't exactly yet, but I do believe, and I know that it doesn't necessarily resonate with folks moving yet. But particularly in light of the previous discussion, if the housing authority were to pursue 4% tax credit projects, you could immediately apply that scenario of the 50% that you set aside to buy down units at 30. So you'll see an immediate effect for the very next project whenever you decide to do one, because you have funds that are set aside for such. And as Jim alluded to, it's easier to buy down a unit at 60 to 30 than to buy down one from 80 to 30, because so there is that ability to achieve even beyond what folks even assume with this tool. And understand the tool is what it is. It's not a 4% tax credit project, which is good or bad depending on who you speak with. But that's not what is the intent of the tool is. So you all have been creative to date in what you've done related to this tool, and I would applaud you for that. And I think that there's ability to do that much more, but it comes at a cost. But we feel like you're kind of splitting the difference by what you're suggesting, you know what I mean? So that would be what my recommendation was if I were asked about such, but.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the trade-off in my mind is we're reducing the structure and the fees that we're going to receive, that half of which would go to the set aside, which we could apply to deeply affordable units. But to get more affordability with this number of units and a $2 million reduction in annual fees, I think is worthwhile. So I don't know what anybody else, other input, but.
So the only concern that I have, is when we attended the meeting on the 24th, Commissioner Shea had some concerns with the percentages that we set forward in the deals that we've done previously. And I don't think that it is still clear to her what the differences are and what it is that we're proposing. And my fear is, if we move forward, although this is very similar to what we've done previously, there's still a level of confusion that I think is not cleared up.
Yeah, and if I may, I talked to Andrew Shields, who's over Travis County Corporations, because they were referenced, right? As in, we require these in our deals. So I wanted to ask, well, do you, and how does that look? What Commissioner Shea was referencing was 2 394 deals that were acquisition deals. And understand, if someone's coming to you with an acquisition deal, that must mean that they're running into financial trouble and can't do their deal. So they're looking for a tax exemption to make themselves whole. And those deals, there is no policy. Let me start off saying there is no policy, even though that was stated that there is a policy. I was straight from Andrea, there is no policy related to 60% affordability. And then she was, so one, they're representing 394 and not PFCs. They were talking about an acquisition deal. We haven't been doing acquisition, and I don't think that's necessarily inclination of the board to do acquisitions. Because if it's on the tax roll, you're taking it off, it hadn't reached the tax rolls, and there's potential of what you would assume would get taxes that you're not getting, right? So that's another conversation. And in that case, they did negotiate 49%, 51% of the units at 60 and 49% at market rate. But you were talking about apples and oranges and tangerines. Well, what I'm saying is that she is getting more clarification about that. So, but we're not talking about PFCs, we're talking about something different. And I was told by Andrea that it was initial discussion that they were having. So she is providing more clarity to the commissioner related to that, but we are not talking about the same tool.
I get that, right? But my concern is, from a commissioner's court perspective, do they get that? Because Commissioner Shea is very vocal,
right,
in her interpretation and her feeling about what it is that we're doing. And I just feel like with, you know, Mr. Paver and yourself, that there's some due diligence, and even with Mr. Palmer, right, that there's some due diligence that still needs to take place.
Right.
So that we're not the ones that stand here saying that we see it when the court doesn't. So.
No, I understand your point. I do, so to your point, there should be that. And as you know, that would be the plan going forward in terms of that. So we're not, yes, to your point, that is correct. But I assure you that there will be enough clarity by the time they reach the commission report. It was a day before, so there was more of a reaction. But again, I wanted to understand what they were talking about because I know the model and I know that that's not achievable in a normal context. So I wanted to get clarity on that. So, but you are right to that point, but regardless of whether whatever we do, other than asking for the same exact thing, which is not achievable. You will absolutely not be able to do that in this scenario, right? What you was recommending.
Yeah, I just want to echo our chair's wanting to be responsive to each and every one of the commissioners for the tiny bit of time we had to deal with actual details. And if I understand you correctly, Mr. Howard, Andrew Shields works for the commissioners.
She runs Travis County Corporation.
So
I think we talked about this
person
because
could communicate with Commissioner Shea.
she's the one who had the meeting with Commissioner Shea the day before we had the meeting. And presented 2 deals to her, 2 394 deals. So she runs the equivalent of,
My
she
point
runs Travis
being,
County.
is there any
HFC.
way this person could clarify things themselves with Commissioner Shea?
Yes, that is her intention,
Okay, awesome.
yes. Because there was reference to Travis County, what we were doing, I knew she was speaking about Ms. Shields. So I immediately respond that afternoon and find out, Mrs. Shields, what is this we're talking about? So yes, she runs the HFC for Travis.
Okay. Further discussion, questions about this structure, opinions about it?
My opinion, as someone who is not in the business of developing or housing, is that we should be going for more deeper affordability, even though Commissioner Shea wasn't, I guess, speaking correctly about the details. Her overarching comment to us was that we need to have people at 30%. And so I would just go on record as saying, as a policy, I think we should be trying to include people at 30%.
Can I make a suggestion to you? Instead of approving a new specific policy right now, and having a board vote on the policy, what I would suggest to you is that you allow us to, if you wish to do the 2 deals on the board agenda today, that you allow us to move forward with 20% at 60% in those 2 deals and use them to start educating the county. And if in fact we go to the commissioner's court and the commissioner's court says, no, we're not doing this, then we can readjust our policy to what we need to get commissioner's court approval. But I think that what Patrick and I will do is we would start telling developers, we have to have 5% at 50 or 20% at 60, or we won't take it to the county. And even at that, we can't guarantee you county approval at this point because we haven't taken something to the county. But that would let us start moving forward and trying to figure out whether this will work for the county.
I mean, I think there's two things that are on the table here. One is providing more affordable units. 20% at 60 is an improvement on what we've been doing. The other is going out and getting a tax credit deal and thinking about how to use the set aside to achieve 30% is a goal worth flushing out and putting the paper and seeing who might be interested in doing that. As long as we have dual avenues that we're pursuing to not only get deeply affordable units, but get more affordability in Travis County, those things can coexist.
But didn't we do that? I mean, we've done that. There've been development projects that's come forward already that we've approved at 20% on 60%, correct?
No. We've done
There have been 10%.
10 at 60, 40 at 80.
Okay. I thought there were.
No.
So unless it was affordability unlocked, then you saw a different scenario, which I think Frontier Valley was one of them, or Springdale, where there was different affordability levels. But that was only because they were meeting the city's requirement for affordability unlocked because they were getting subsidized through the city's effort, not necessarily just the PFC deal in and of itself. But as Mr. Paver alluded to, the coupling of the tax credit program, you know what I mean, and the set aside is stronger than the independent idea of trying to produce 30% units by virtue of the PFC in and of itself. If you go to Hawker today and find out all 5 of their deals, none of them have anything remotely close to this, and there is no set aside because it's not what the model produces. So you're trying to leverage money to use for another purpose in another context, which makes a ton of sense. And like I said, it's probably very forward thinking in that regard, but the workforce housing that was envisioned through the TCFC structure does not lend itself. So 5 at 30, 10 at 60, and then 35 at 80 does provide some means if we are interested in the notion of at least having 30% units in, and I would offer that as an alternate. If in fact you feel very strongly that you want to put 5% in, or put 30% units in, and that's why it's being shown there as another option. And you still could put the set aside and still have more 30% units in a 4% deal, which is what I would offer as an alternative to that. But beyond that, you're not getting nearly as many as you would otherwise if you applied it in another scenario, because again, you're reducing a fee, so you don't have as much for 30% units in another scenario, which is more likely because of what you're reducing. But I mean, some of it's optics, right? I mean, you're trying to manage what that looks like. But the reality on paper is that you're talking about less money for 30% units at the end of the day. So it all depends on how you feel. I know it's a perception, so it may be that you might want to put in some 30% units because it appears to be more helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
And part of the perception is, I'm not sure I've had the experience of seeing the set aside used. Has that been done?
Yes, we use the set it. Well, again, we needed to amass enough money to do something with it
When was it done and what it looked like?
at Maynard Town Phase 2,
And when?
which is
We're in the process.
Maynard Town Phase 2 is the housing authority project, where we needed almost $1 million and as you know, there's 18 units at 30% and 2 at 50. Right. But understand that we just came into this pot of money, so we haven't been applying it necessarily.
Okay.
So now we have $4 million now we can leverage in a real way. So as opposed to so that was really the goal, and we hadn't had these kinds of discussions. I mean, last year we were mulling over the idea of doing an RFP when Rosales was on the board. to say, maybe we'll do an RFP and solicit the help of a nonprofit like a Guadalupe Neighborhood Association or something like that. But she since actually left and moved on, so there's not been any robust discussion about how to use the 30%. The set aside for that purpose until most recently when we started talking about it.
Thank you, and I think that would help with the perception, to flush some of that out. And to have that be represented to the commissioners court at whatever time we reach. Sorry.
Patrick, I'm gonna bring you a tax credit deal next month. In conjunction with another PFC deal. And NRP is gonna propose it. We should have it ready by next month, and I think that'll help everybody understand and demonstrate what we're trying to do.
What's the
And we can't vote on the idea, we can't vote on the motion today anyway. So, and we were just gonna try to get consensus about how we should sort of formulate a resolution of sorts. That's kind of where we are, so.
There's no motion or anything made.
No, sir.
So we need to go back to the action item 4.
If we're done with this, I mean, unless,
Other questions, concerns? On this issue? Okay,
I think I'll be getting with the real estate committee again. For them, bring this full circle, okay.
okay. Back to action item number 4, A, resolution number TCFC -2023-15 to approve inducing the UG Techridge Apartments in partnership with an affiliate of Urban Genesis LLC to be located approximately at 4712 East Yeager and Palmer Lane, and authorizing the negotiation and execution of a term sheet and other matters in connection therewith.
So Jim, if you just, briefly touch on this, this does look more like our legacy ask. Obviously, because we're still contemplating well how we might change, so Jim, if you could just briefly just touch on that.
Yeah, what the term sheet is drafted at the 10% at 60% and 40% at 80% with a 25% share of property taxes. The developer has agreed that if you approve the transaction and authorize the term sheet to change, that the term sheet would change to be 20% at 60%, 30% at 80%, and our rental rate would drop to 15% of the property taxes.
Okay.
And I believe there's an Urban Genesis person there to present on the project.
No, sir, there, someone from iTex is here, but just as an example of what Urban Genesis projects look like. If you go out of this building, you look to your right and you look to your left, those are both held by Urban Genesis.
Okay. Questions?
And actually, Patrick, I can share the presentation that on this project, if the board would like to see the proposal.
We have it up, it was in the packet, I'm gonna see if they have any questions. And then
Okay, sounds good.
You can answer, you can entertain them.
I entertain a motion to approve resolution TCFC 2023-15. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, resolution B, resolution number TCFC -2023-16 to improve inducing the Stone Creek Ranch Apartments in partnership with an affiliate of the iTex Group to be located at approximately 14000 County Line Road and authorizing the negotiation and execution of the term sheet and other matters in connection therewith.
Okay, we do have a representative from ITEX, the developer. We will just provide. Simpson, did you wanna walk through the PowerPoint or how do you wanna do this?
Yes, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we're pulling it up right now. What's your last name? I'm sorry.
Babalola. So,
Yes.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Samson Babalola. I am a development director for the ITEX Group, which is a residential development firm based in Houston, Texas, with properties in Texas, Louisiana, and Colorado. Good. Okay. So today's presentation will focus on ITEX's workforce housing concept, which is a development investment strategy developed by the ITEX Group. ITEX, as mentioned earlier, we specialize in residential development, specifically multifamily, single-family housing, and high-growth Sunbelt markets. Next slide. So why the need for workforce housing? We also dabble in the affordable housing market as well. But why the need for workforce housing? So in many cities across the country, it's becoming increasingly difficult for middle income workers to buy or rent housing in the areas where they work. This is due in part to stagnant wages and increasing costs of living. But it's also due to limited housing supply as well. And so I'm sure, as many of you know, here in Travis County firsthand, there's a high demand for housing, but just a limited supply due to market conditions, et cetera. And so in response to limited affordable housing options in the areas where people work, many of our middle income workers, they move out to the fringes of the region and they look for housing. And so, this leads to longer commutes, high levels of traffic, and other negative external things that happen being long-term commuters. So I'm coming in from Houston and came into some of that Austin traffic this morning. So I know how that commute can be. So workforce housing is defined as affordable housing that's targeted to households who make in between 60% to 100% of their AMI. I believe the AMI for Travis County is around 122,000 for a family of four. We target middle income workers such as police officers, firefighters, teachers, healthcare workers, retail clerks, etc. These are households who we call the missing middle. Essentially, they don't qualify to live at a tax credit development. They don't qualify for Section 8, but they're still either housed burden due to having paid more than 30% of their income towards housing. Some of the key features of our workforce housing concept. We target, here again, families between 60% to 120% of the AMI. We think that this is a bridge housing of sorts, where we fill the void between low income and market rate housing options. And we believe that this is an opportunity for urban integration as well. It's a place where residents are close to their workplaces and promoting social cohesion and local economic growth. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. So as mentioned earlier, we know that there's an affordability gap issue in the country, and more specifically in the state of Texas. So Texas now ranks as the 6th worst state in the US for affordable housing, with a shortage of roughly about 675,000 rental homes for renter households. Specifically, metro areas like Dallas, Houston, Austin, we rank as 3rd, 4th, and 5th worst metro areas respectively in the nation for affordable housing. So we know that the demand is high in Texas, right? We're definitely a growing state due to our, number of availability of jobs, affordability per se. But just the demand is not keeping up with the construction of residential properties. Next slide, please. And so this is our opportunity to develop here in the Travis County area. Our proposed development is called Stone Creek Ranch, which is a built for rent community located in Elgin, Texas. It's 288 units on 68 acres, located, right outside of downtown Austin, roughly about a 30-minute drive. And so we think that Stone Creek Ranch will be a perfect blend of, suburban charm and urban connectivity. We can see here the thresholds or the income mix of the development. So half of the units will be at market rate. The other half of the units will be at 60% AMI and or 80% of the AMI. We can also see down below the average rents for each bedroom type. So Stone Creek Ranch will have 1 bedrooms up to 4-bedroom homes within the development. Next slide, please. On-site amenities. And so Stone Creek Ranch will feature a large pond, walking trail, access to a community park, an amenity center, and a resort style pool as well. Next slide. Some of the neighborhood amenities, Stone Creek Ranch will be located near core retail such as H-E-B and Walmart. Access to nearby healthcare clinics, pharmacies, some walking distance of Elgin High School and Elgin Elementary. And then of course, adjacent to Highway 290 to get to high paying jobs such as Samsung, Tesla, and downtown Austin. Next slide, please. Here are some elevations of our concepts, the different bedroom types. So we can see our 1-bedrooms are, 1,100, roughly about 1,155 square feet. 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,310 square feet. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and then 4-bedroom, 2-bath concept as well. And so what we're seeing in the market is that individuals, especially with the pandemic, we can see where individuals want kind of like their own space. If you don't want to live in a traditional apartment, you have an opportunity to live basically in a subdivision where you can have your own garage and you can have your own larger space. Next slide, please. So again, who needs housing that's affordable? That's workforce housing. Really the missing middle. I think the state's housing tax credit program tries to address, for the most part, individuals who are at 30% to 60% of the AMI. Same thing with the housing authority through their voucher program, addressing those individuals or households who are making 30% to 60% of the AMI. But that missing middle of families who are they can't afford necessarily the market rate rents, but they can't qualify for the various affordable housing programs out there. Those are the individuals and families that we target through this build to rent concept. Next slide. So this slide depicts the rise of home values. So we can see the meteoric rise for the Austin area. Same thing as well for Elgin, as well as they continue to grow. Next slide. This is just a summary about ITEX, and that concludes my presentation. So
Thank you very much.
no problem. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Questions?
Do you have any developments here in our county?
We are, we do have a affordable housing development here in the Austin area. I don't remember the exact name of it. We're working on Stone Creek Ranch, and then we're also working on another development out in Elgin called the Cape, which is a multi-family concept.
So have we worked with the city of Elgin to share?
It's not in the city of Elgin proper, that's why most people don't know, this portion of the Elgin, ETJ in Travis County, so it's.
Yeah,
That's
you
the
know,
Elgin
the,
address, but it's Wilmer's neighborhood.
service station with the, Kentucky Fried Chicken in there. It's right before you get to ACC
Okay,
campus, that's part of Travis County.
Yeah.
Okay. Couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
What are you doing for childcare? Is there any consideration for that?
Right, so, we'll be definitely working on partnerships, to, connect with local, childcare centers, in the area. It's also my understanding as well that, Elgin ISD provides some after-school programs as well, for working parents, and so we're working on, efforts to identify those partnerships, to address the childcare.
Yeah, the concern is, you're out there and the closest thing to you is probably 3 miles away.
Yes, sir.
You gotta work 15 miles away, so you gotta drop somebody off, kids at childcare and then try to get to work or whatever, unless it's on the way. So, that may be something to consider.
Yes, sir.
More so. And secondly, these are total rent, no time in the future will they, a person that be able to own or transition to that or what?
That is-
Their individual units.
Yeah, these are strictly for rent. Yes, sir.
And how successful have you seen those structures? And you're looking at what, about 300 units?
288 units, yes, sir.
Yeah, that's what I looked at.
Yeah, so we're working on this concept right outside of Houston and Humble. And then we're also working on the same kind of concept as well in Northwest Arkansas and Fayetteville. The build to rent market, has really kind of taken its own form over the last decade and has been a very successful concept amongst the development community. And so this is our way of providing families, who have, may have two kids, 3 kids, and, an apartment just doesn't accommodate a family of your size.
The final question is, what has been your occupancy rate of those units? And the ones that are built and leased out?
Yeah, so typically we see, occupancy anywhere between 90 to 95% on that build to rent communities.
How would we manage the upkeep of those properties from a TCFC perspective? How is, apartments are different than homes. You have the homes, you have lots, there's a whole conglomerate of things that tie to
Yeah,
homes, and you're talking 300.
right, and this wouldn't be, this probably is a more internal discussion about what we think we should do as an organization. I know that we've been talking about that in the context of looking at hiring a third-party compliance person, potentially to do that, which may be something we want to entertain. This is new for us in this context. So we do have some time because it'll take a little while before they can get constructed. So we may have an answer in the future by the time it gets constructed to figure out how we manage these, because we're talking about a little while, But there is a possibility that we might want to consider hiring a third party to do that type of compliance and management, and we can do that.
If I may, there's out in Lakeway, there's a concept where you pay into the HOA, and the HOA takes care of the yard, and it takes care of the entire outside structure. If you need painting, they paint that also. So that's the concept. But you gotta have the HOA fee.
Right, see, I would personally, I would feel more comfortable seeing a holistic plan versus signing off on something that I don't know what the implications are gonna be to TCFC for the upkeep of something like that. That's my preference.
Right, what I'm saying is this never come up, so. I
Yeah,
mean,
I understand,
right, yeah,
but I'm just
so,
saying, I mean, I know that it's new,
yeah,
right? But to bring this forward and we not see, I don't want this to be like the property that we just finished dealing with over on the strategic side. I just, you know, so I would like to see personally, I mean, that's my preference, but.
yeah, and I think we have an opportunity, you know, to raise as we're in the formative stages of talking about approval. I don't know what the construction timeline is, we're talking about 18 months or so.
It's about 24 months.
Yeah, so we have an opportunity to have a robust plan. What I was suggesting to you is the idea of compliance has come up in discussions with the city of Austin, because they were asking us about the very same thing. So that is something that we do need to work on, is to develop a strategy to ensure that we are compliant from a curb appeal perspective to all of the compliance that, you know, is required from the financing and occupancy standpoint. So I think that is something that it's a good point to be raised and one that should be worked on.
And that's where the homeowners association.
Well, this is the rental.
Well, that's not,
Yeah.
but that's where you set aside some portion of the rent to take care of all of those things.
Yeah, and so as far as the outside maintenance upkeep, because this is a rental community, it's gonna be managed as a traditional rental community. So we're ITEC's responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the outside of the unit. So whether that be lawn maintenance or the exterior as well, that's the responsibility of ITEC as the private property manager. Now the mechanism of how all of that works, I don't have the details on that right now. I'm sure that, you know, it'll be contracted out to, you know, third-party vendors in the Elgin community or Travis County community. But here again, maintenance upkeep, that falls upon ITEC as the property manager.
There are a couple things in our documents that we have in actually every document. First, in our leases, there is a commitment to maintain as a Class A rental facility. And so that basically means you look at other properties that were Class A properties built at the same time, and they have to maintain them to that standard. I think it's fair to say that the strategic project that we have been burdened with was not maintained to a Class A standard. Secondly, we mandate a physical needs assessment conducted by a licensed engineer every 7 years and upon every sale. They then have to make the required changes under the physical needs assessment to the extent they are financially affordable or they financially can do it. We included the concept of having to do that upon a sale because that is when they should have the money to actually make those changes. So we do have provisions in our documents that are different than the tax credit type of deals that you've been dealing with.
And toward that end, internally, we obviously have the ability to increase that and have our own independent kind of additional review if we so chose to get that opportunity does exist.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Or we just lost one more. So form. Okay.
Well, let me just see.
We'll get through the rest. The marathon today.
It's the first time there. There's business.
It was.
It's good business.
Yeah, we'll be right back. Did you barge in?
Well, let me say this as we're waiting. So the folks at ITEX have been very engaged with us. They have a local person who is known for her community supportive services and partnerships, and she's shared with me a number of initiatives that they have with, I can't think of her name right now, she's doing it.
Regina Adams.
Regina Adams, oh my God, don't
Yeah,
tell
you
her
are
I
gonna get in
forgot.
trouble.
I know, I was like, hey, why do you have to ask me this? So, Ms. Adams has been very integral in talking about her partnerships with the schools, with Samsung, with a number of individuals, and she's local, and so she has been very much, engaged in this project. And, I think that you will hear more about this being quite a model, given what I've heard her talk about related to this project.
I think I see.
Adams, I hope you're not
Are they going up
watching.
now? Are they going up now? Is construction started on those now?
No, sir.
Okay, well, there's something similar to this, on Food Island.
Okay.
Yeah, like.
Got a motion to approve TCFC, resolution number TCFC 2023-16. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Uh,
Aye.
Do you not? Okay.
Okay, moving on. We've already covered, number 5, discussion item. Moving on to number 6, regular agenda, finance, Supra.
Good afternoon. So there were no receipts for TCFC in July. There are the financials in the packet for the month of July. So pretty much all the funds have been moved to tax pool where it's earning 5% interest. We have $4 million in the set aside fund and $3 million in the regular TCFC account. And I think in July we made $30,000 in interest. So that's about all I.
Okay, thank you.
Tax pool is paying pretty good.
Question for Supra? Okay, board committee reports. We covered everything that we discussed on the real estate committee. Anything else? No other reports? Item 8, new unfinished business. Is there anything to discuss? Okay, item 9, any reason for us to go into executive session? I have none. Okay, item 10, adjournment. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Sorry, who seconded that? Seconded that.
Seconded the move.
Movement to adjourn, Jan.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank
Yeah.
you.
That's okay.